Peter, yeah. Are you all seeing a little thing? All right, there you go. And admitting more people. It's the multitasking. Thanks, Kate. After I give you an overview about what the Beaver Coexistence Training and Support Program is all about, Brock is going to give us a little bit about the natural history and history of beavers in California. We will take a break. And at 9:55 for 10 minutes in case you need to step out, breathe deep, getting something to drink or eat. We'll be back at 10:05 with Kathy and me talking a little bit about the logistics of our our training and some background, and we'll be able to have some conversation about that, as well as a second presentation by Kathy, exciting about permitting. And then Valerie, you're here. Thank you. We're gonna end with Valerie Cook talking about their state wildlife department's beaver restoration program, and we'll close at noon. I want to ask people to please not interrupt vocally. If you've got a question, please raise either your real hand because I can see it, except when I'm presenting, or your virtual hand on the screen. We will have time for discussion, so if we can hold questions for that, that'd be great. But if there's something crucial that you need to understand before we um, move further, yeah, please let us know. You can always also put your question in the chat, which is enabled. Okay, so let's start out with introductions, and I will, in an orderly manner, call on the first person and then say somebody else is next up. Please introduce yourself, your name, your organizational affiliation, if you've got one, or your business name, where you plan on working with the Beaver Corps, with the Beaver Coexistence. What sort of geography are you going to cover? And then finally, what do you hope to gain from this experience today and in the field? What's one main thing? Don't be general because we'd love to get like very specific about what you are looking forward to so we can emphasize that. Okay, I can remind you of the question's name, organization, geography, and what do you hope to learn? Let's see. Why don't we do Kathy first and then Cooper?
Hi, my name is Kathy Mueller. My business is Connected Ecology. Um, I am planning to do beaver coexistence in El Dorado County and all of the surrounding counties. Maybe two counties deep. We'll see. We'll see how this all shakes out with our larger group. And from this training next week, I hope to gain connections with all of you and builds build a California group that we can talk with each other and learn from each other and make progress with beaver coexistence in California. So
Thanks,
thanks.
Kathy. Yeah, Cooper and then River.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cooper Leinhart. I'm founder of Nature's Engineers. We're a local process-based restoration business and hopefully beaver coexistence on the central coast of California, based in San Luis Obispo County. And I am looking forward to um, learning all the logistics, what equipment I'll need, how to, get my truck ready so that I have everything I need so that I'm capable to do these coexistence devices. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Cooper. If I get background noise from people, I'm going to hit mute. Yeah, Aaron's asking people to mute so we can be focused. River, you're next, and then Laurel.
Hi, my name is River. I live in Richmond in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. Right now, I am on the restoration field crew at the Watershed Project, but I'm really passionate about healing our water cycles through water infiltration and retention. And would I'm moving towards the steps of starting my own business in creating, yeah, like water infiltration basins, and would love to incorporate beaver coexistence services right from the start into it. So I want to learn from folks who have been doing this already.
Mhm.
Very excited to meet you all soon.
Thank you, Laurel, and then Lana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laurel. I'm in Cloverdale in northern Sonoma County. So I'm hoping to um, work around this area and even north of here up into Mendocino, wherever it's needed. I am looking forward to next week to get into the physicality and the structural development of these flow devices because I can intellectualize it from part one, but I feel like I really need to get my hands in the construction of it, and just being able to watch it come together will be great.
Mhm. Thank you, Lana, and then Nikki.
Hi, my name's Lana. I live up in Arcata in Humboldt County, so far northern California. I'm a licensed civil engineer in California. I've done water resources engineering for about 10 years. But over the last few years, I've been much more interested in process-based restoration and using beavers as the actual engineers, kind of like Cooper's company suggests with Nature's Engineers. And I've done some work with symbiotic restoration out of here in Arcata or in McKinleyville, and also with Swiftwater Design doing BDAs and installing PALs and things like that. But, a huge part of humans being able to have beavers on our landscape now is being able to coexist with our built infrastructure as well. So, putting that engineer hat and dealing with culverts and roads, but how do we put in the right structures so that beavers can also be there? And so I'm in this program and excited to work pretty much anywhere north of Santa Cruz in California or Southern Oregon. So it's my zone.
Mhm. Thank you, Nikki, and then Mike. You're on mute.
Thank you. My name is Nikki Hill. I've actually been fairly nomadic for 14 years, so I spent a lot of time in Colorado, the Great Basin, and the Lake Tahoe area. So I plan on doing some beaver work in the Tahoe Basin and spreading out from there into the Great Basin and any other place where there's good opportunities. I'm really excited to be a part of OAEC and the Beaver Institute, something I thought about for a few years. So yeah, just looking forward to collaborations that can happen.
Thanks, Nikki. Mike, and then Jeremy, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. Mike Lennox. I'm in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County. I've got the sheep here, and I'm also a creek biologist. 25 years, kind of doing more of the riparian restoration and then surveys. So I'm excited to expand services and get into process-based approaches. Done a lot of drainage projects, and so I'm a perfect kind of step for us as a business. And what was the other question?
What are you most looking forward to learning with us in this field excursion?
How to adapt the methods to the coast range of California, I think is a big question in my mind. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Jeremy, and then David.
Hey, I'm Jeremy Kelly with the Western Shasta Resource Conservation District, and I've got a phone and a computer on because my computer doesn't have speakers. So let me get my other, let's see, how do I turn this
It's
on?
coming through loud and clear.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I work for the Western Shasta Resource Conservation District in Shasta County. I'm currently a project coordinator, but I've mainly been a field guy for the last 20 years. Involved in stream restoration, mostly form-based stream restoration projects, planting willows, decommissioning roads, restoring riparian zones. And I've seen firsthand how much waste there is with the plantings. We use all this plastic and drip line, and we get 80% plants, maybe 90, but it's still excessively expensive with a lot of waste. So when I saw process-based restoration results from local beaver ponds, and then I got involved in the VDA training, I've been involved in that, wanting to pursue that ever since. And so I've operated a small business over the years, mostly landscaping. I like to do native plants, but I'll do mow lawns too if needed. It's just a little side hustle business that's called Kelly Roots. So I'm probably going to revamp that business to include Beaver Coexistence services, but keep the name because I like it. And I've got a second home in Eugene, Oregon, so I'll probably work anywhere from say Sacramento up to anywhere within traveling distance of Eugene. And I must say there's a lot of beavers up there, so I expect there to be quite a bit of work. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of outreach with the public, and I love reading, so I do a lot of hands-on stuff with kids. We have outdoor classrooms at a beaver pond. We do fundraisers to put these events on, and that's the stuff I'm really good at. And even though I'm a field guy, sometimes I lack confidence on learning a new skill, but it takes me a while, but I get it down. So I'm really anxious to get in the water and start putting these things together, and see how good of skills I have in it, and how much work I'll still have to do to get to where I can do this with the same skill I do my other work.
Great.
And that's about it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
David and then Andrew. You're on mute, David. Sorry.
It gave me the notification. Yep. Thank you. My name's David. I live in Sacramento, but I'm from Central Coast, San Luis Obispo, kind of North County area. And I am the co-owner and operator of the Wet Meadows Institute, LLC, which is a restoration consulting and fuels management group. Most of the work that we are involved in now is ladder fuels management and woody biomass utilization, kind of using a fair amount of heavy equipment. We have a fleet of vehicles. So I'm hoping to kind of bring this business line, into the company, as the primary practitioner, but utilize some of our staff and my business partner to implement this work really anywhere in the West. I know, Gray, I told you my area of action is quite large just because we have a fleet of, camper vehicles and retired fire buggies. So we're super mobile and kind of willing to travel anywhere. And I am most interested just to see how implementation actually, works in terms of workflow and, what are the most efficient and effective means to get this, mitigation and coexistence infrastructure in the ground so that we can start, saving beavers.
All right.
One last thing, I'm also a licensed trapper. So I'm hoping that this will make it so that I don't have to do that as much. And also maybe utilize that licensure to, with CDFW, work on relocation.
All right. There's some ambition. Thank you for joining. Andrew and then Rick.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm in Roseville. Going to kind of be covering Sacramento, northern all of California. Let's see. Sorry, I forgot the questions, but
I'll remind you. And does your camera work on your computer, or we're not able
I
to
don't.
see?
I
Okay.
just got a new computer and it's not working.
Okay. So please, let us know. Will you have a business and what you're hoping to work on, and what do you hope to learn from the training?
So my business is Leave It to Beavers. I'm in Sacramento, and I'm hoping to kind of work around this area or anywhere in Northern California and kind of all the way down into some sections of Central California. I'm kind of hoping to learn, really just kind of be in the field and see everything that we've seen, like in books and, or in articles and instructions and everything kind of come together in real time and, see it all come together.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Rick and then Silas.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Rick Stachok. I am living in La Selva Beach. It's just south of Santa Cruz. I've lived a bunch in Chico and in Tahoe, and I also like to travel. So geographically, my interest would be just about anywhere. I was in wilderness education and river guiding and backpacking for a long time. I'm 55 and excited to enter a whole new career, is what this kind of feels like to me. I've been interested in rewilding as a concept, and I think that's kind of what spurred my ending up being right here. I have a GIS, a little GIS company with my wife, so I think that might come into play. And really, what this is about for me is I have a kid. He's 15. He's awesome, and I wanted to find something that was good and hopeful to get into. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is learning how to work with beavers and people that work with beavers. So I'm excited. See you in a couple days.
Thank you, Rick. Silas, you're up, and then Jordan, and then Geneva.
I'm trying to get my video working here. Just a second.
All right. Yep. Good. Listen, this is exciting to hear from everybody and know the geography and people, a little bit about people and their background. I imagine that many of us will be working together, not so separately. There's a lot of collaboration in this field.
Yeah, my video doesn't seem to work at the moment. I'm sorry. This is a new to me laptop.
Okay.
Anyway, my name is Silas. I live in San Diego County, rural southeast San Diego County. I plan on covering most of Southern California, so I'd be doing San Diego, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, Imperial. And I already kind of covered that area anyway. I do a live bee removal, among other things, but 90% of my work is currently live bee removal and natural beekeeping mentoring. And I got into that just because, pollinators are, so critical. And the other things that I provide are like permaculture design, biological soil restoration, bringing back the ecological soil life to support plant life, and occasionally live rattlesnake removal in my local area. The business is still pretty young, so I'm still developing it, but I really see the beaver work as being completely synergistic with all of my other offerings. Like it's, basically like a ecological services company in a lot of ways. And I have a background in engineering and applied physics as well, that I bring to the table. So I have a very, systematic way of thinking about things and building systems and, what else? This has always been like a core part of me as an adult. Has always been I want to leave the world a better place than I found it, and right livelihood is a big part of that. So I've worked in engineering in the past, and I've kind of moved away from that. I still do some engineering projects, but I pick and choose what I engage with there.
And what are you most looking forward to learning from this field exercise?
Just the practical, hands-on stuff. Starting to build up the the intuitive, neural network to be able to recognize this situation we move this way, this situation we move that way, right? So just looking forward to getting all of that really nuanced stuff just kind of in my head.
Great.
I'm really excited about working with beavers because they definitely are the single biggest leverage point that we have right now, in terms of ecological restoration. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Jordan, and then Geneva.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see so many familiar faces. My name is Jordan Vermillion. I live in unceded Mountain Maidu territory up in Plumas County. Uh, Geneva is my sweetheart. Yeah, we live in a place called Genesee Valley in Plumas County. And we run Upstream Ecology, which is a process-based restoration company. And I started out doing PBR work with Swift Water about 6 years ago. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. There's so much to always learn. I'm very excited to just learn about the implementation of these devices and yeah, get creative about strapping the pipe on top of our truck. And yeah, it's just I'm honored to be a part of this group.
Thank you, Geneva, and then Valerie.
Yeah. Morning, everyone. I'm Geneva Sorensen. Yep, live with this beautiful woman up where the Northern Sierras kiss the Southern Cascades, and it's a super beautiful spot. And yeah, we because we run upstream ecology and really are working where people want us to pay us to come do some good work on the land. We're pretty mobile, so California kind of is our stated geography, but like you said, Gray, this is such a collaborative community, and we're in support of what makes sense for drive time and impact on the environment of different groups getting different places and timing and scheduling. So we're flexible in that way and just are supportive of coexistence strategies getting implemented, period. And feeling super stoked and grateful that you all are coordinating this and wrangling all these wild beavers to do some more good work on the land. And I'm excited also, like Silas said, for the practical application. And I think for me, just like the practice of doing some site assessment and just kind of understanding the nuance and seeing a different area and kind of, taking what we learned so much in the training and now trying to funnel that into the real world and just kind of grease those axles a little bit. So yeah, happy to be here and good to see everyone.
Thank you. Valerie and then Aaron.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Valerie Cook. I am CDFW's Beaver Restoration Program Manager, and I'm overly excited right now hearing all the names and where everybody is. I'm like coloring in a map of the coverage of the state and who to point people to as we go. So this is really great and encouraging. This is the network that we were hoping for. So really happy to be on and getting to know everyone. Unfortunately, next week, you probably won't be seeing me out on the field tour, but you will be meeting a few other members of our team that you'll be coordinating with as well moving forward. But I'll be presenting later today and just filling you in about the program and how it works, and also other processes and people that, how all of the coordination and the processes work in the department in terms of who will be having opportunities to connect with you and trying to build out that network of your expertise and assistance and connecting you with the folks in the department that will be helping connect you with the landowners. So yeah, happy to be involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Valerie. Aaron and then Mike.
Hey everyone, great to see everyone. I'm Aaron Hall. I'm the Beaver Corps Program Director here at the Beaver Institute. So I've been doing beaver work for about a decade now, including coexistence as a practitioner in the field and a manager in various aspects. You've probably seen my name on various emails if you're in Beaver Corps, so great to have some faces to go with the names. And I'm looking forward to next week to getting out in the field with everyone, getting to know you all better, and really, figuring out what Beaver Institute can do, get you the practical field skills to make you all successful in this line of work.
Thanks, Aaron. Mike and then Kate.
Hi, everyone. Mike Callahan, Beaver Institute instructor and also board president. And, I've met some of you virtually, few in person, and really looking forward to meeting everyone in person next week. And I do think that we're going to be able to, it's a great opportunity. So I appreciate everyone that's helped put this together because we're going to be doing a lot of, practical things that really drive home what you've been learning and the online stuff. And there's nothing like seeing it in person, doing it in person, and tailoring what you learn to the California landscape. So I'm excited and can't wait to see everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Kate.
Oh, and I'm in Massachusetts, by the way.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. As you can hear from my voice, I have a cold, so I'm not going to be as vocally active in today's moment. And thank you, Brock, for being willing to take over our collaborative presentation. Appreciate that. I'm Kate Lundquist. I co-direct the Water Institute at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center and been doing that for the last 20 years with Brock. And I'm partners with Kevin Swift of Swift Water Design, so we've got some nice overlap between beaver and process-based restoration. And I am just so excited to finally have this happening. For the last 15 years, we've been really working hard to build California's capacity to create a culture of stewardship for beaver, and that always starts with coexistence and to, suddenly now have the resources. Thank you, CDFW, for funding this. We really appreciate that. And thank you to Beaver Institute for being willing to collaborate with us so that we could bring your amazing, well-established program here to actually, do this for real in California and really make a difference. So I'm really excited that it's happening and that we will be able to have a really strong network to send people to get some really good coexistence work done. And so this next week, I'm just really looking forward to meeting you all and hearing about what you're doing and where you're going with this and just being a resource for you. And yeah, just having that beautiful marriage of all of this experience that's been happening across North America come to California and do some cross-pollination about techniques and whatnot. And to be able to be in the field with Beaver Institute, which we don't get to do. So I'm super excited about that too. And all of you. So really looking forward to it. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. Brock, you're next to last. I'll introduce last.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, Brock Dahlman and Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, co-director of Water Institute, and our Bring Back the Beaver campaign with Kate. And I equally just am so excited to be here with you all. Is the camaraderie of you cast of convivial castor coexisters in California just brings so much joy to my little beaver loving heart. I'm a wildlife biologist, restoration ecologist, and have been pushing the idea of bringing back beavers in California since the late 90s, so a quarter century into this game. And this moment and you all and what we're going to get to do together next week as a kickoff for the future of beaver coexistence in California with a durable tenure of trained, professional, legitimized folks is amazing and super excited. And I do also want to get behind Kate's comments about gratitude for Mike and Aaron and everybody at Beaver Institute and Beaver Corps for all the work you all have done to professionalize that in the rest of the country and helping, bringing that to us in California in a really good, solid, collaborative way. So I am excited to be here and you're going to hear more from me in a second.
All right. Thank you, Brock. Did I miss anybody? I think we got everybody. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to share this while I introduce myself. Gray Hayes. I'm in Davenport, California, just north of Santa Cruz, working remotely for Occidental Arts and Ecology Center's Water Institute as the Beaver Coexistence Training and Support Program Manager. Been in touch with everyone here, of course. This is part of my work, and I'll let you know the rest of my work. While I'm going through the Beaver Corps training now, slowly, I don't intend to have a business doing this, but I felt like it's important for me to know about this and then help the network along. So thanks to Mike and Aaron, Brock, and Kate for teaching me in this area. I'm a restoration ecologist by training. I got my doctorate at UC Santa Cruz in restoration ecology, looking at disturbance regimes, grazing, fire, flooding, and their effects on species, and how to restore evolutionary disturbance regimes so that we can maintain the wealth of incredible species that California has. And of course, beavers are part of that. They are grand disturbers of riparian ecosystems and so important in that regard. So it's nice to be able to work with this fuzzy creature. And nice to be here today. Nice to meet you all. So I want to tell you a little bit about this program that we're running. First of all, you should know this is like a building network of partners that Kate has begun to thank. Many thanks to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Nature-Based Solutions Wetlands and Mountain Meadows Grant Program for getting this support program going, this training and support program going. We have funding through March of 2027, so keep that timeline in mind as I talk through what we have to offer. Of course, the Beaver Institute is a core partner. Kathy, thank you so much for your early partnership with this training in particular, and the El Dorado and Georgetown Divide RCD, which she'll refer to later as helping with the permitting, and then of this field program. And then we have some real amazing scientists involved with some conflict analysis that I want to thank University of Michigan, Colorado State, and conservation science partners helping. You'll hear more about that. So there's these handful of elements of this Beaver Coexistence program I want to talk about. I won't talk a lot about the first three bullets, the conflict assessment, our response plan, and some of the education outreach. You'll hear more about that as those things happen, because I think that the last three bullets are more relevant to our work. We're going to talk about the Beaver Corps training and Beaver Corps members a little bit, our help desk and landowner assistance. So we are working currently to analyze the CDFW's Wildlife Incident Report database. This is many, many years of data when people are asking how to deal with problem beavers mainly, and that those science partners I mentioned are going to work to understand the degree of conflict, a little bit about the landowner demographics about where the conflict's happening. They're going to sort of bin up and describe the types of conflicts we're experiencing and where those geographies are, using some GIS and social science coding and machine learning tools, delving into census data and land ownership data, economic data, all sorts of amazing layers to that database that luckily others have dealt with in the past with coyotes and bobcats. And so we're tapping on some existing skill in working up that database to better understand the nature of conflicts. Stay tuned. That report's due out at the end of the year. And at the end of our grant cycle, we'll be publishing the human-beaver conflict response plan, using that previously mentioned data plus everything we as a community are going to be learning as we install things. So we're going to try and help to understand moving forward, how do we work together to respond to conflict? How do we best assess projects? This is in California with our interesting hydrology. How do we best sort of work, sort of the machinery of working? How do we say this is sort of the criteria for conflict, and then how do we write scopes of work and deal with project site access and those kinds of things? And then there's the whole how do beaver coexistence contractors best achieve their jobs? So that's in the works right now. We're collecting information. We'll be writing this response plan. In the meantime, Brock, Kate, and I are off to the races with conferences. The first 5 are some that we've already showed up at, and then next we're going to be going to the RCD, California Association of RCD Conference in Sacramento. RCDs, as you know, Jeremy, are such important partners in this realm. So we're hoping to leverage that partnership across the state. And Kate's off to State of the Beaver in Oregon at that same time, while Brock and I are in Sacramento with this California Association of RCDs. Join us at these meetings if you can. All of the meetings that I put here are important for beavers. So if you feel like tapping into your network, join these and more in the future. So to the issue at hand, we are, as you have experienced, offering subsidies. That includes these in-person field trainings that you must attend as well, and there'll be one next year, as well as working on Beaver Coexistence installations, 2 more in order to get certified. Heads up, if you know anybody in Eastern California, tribal folks or agency personnel, those are how we're going to be focusing future subsidies. We have a Beaver Help Desk, going to launch here in a few weeks. This is what it looks like. And I'll just lead you through the Seek Assistance tab. That gets you to here. Look at the bottom where it says there's 2 ways of getting assistance. One is a free assistance application. That's through us, or they can directly contact you all, the pros. This is what happens when they hit that tab to help, ask us for help, for assistance. They get a form to fill out. That form goes to me, and it goes to Alyssa Choate at the Beaver Institute. We provide online virtual technical assistance until we determine, hey, this is something that requires somebody on the ground. And then we also get this this map if people want to contact somebody directly, and they click on, say, El Dorado County. It pumps out this list of people who've indicated that they are willing to work in El Dorado County. This is just a draft, and we're working to polish this a little more. And so we will also, if people contact us and it comes to getting people on the ground, we'll also give them this printout of people that are working in their county. Now, for a limited time only, we'll pay the full cost for site assessment. So once you're out of part 1 and into part 2, Mike and Aaron are willing to mentor people through site assessments, which is really the first step of getting a project on the ground. And then if that works out and a landowner wants help, say, with a low-tech thing like tree protection, we'll just give them money. And of course, that needs to be inspected before and after by a coexistence contractor, make sure it was done right before we release funds, or we can match funds with 30% match in general. And let's say both the stipends and the matching funds require an application for funding support and a landowner agreement that guarantees access by the department for 10 years. Basically, a couple people may come and take pictures once a year to make sure and understand how these things are working. And then heads up, if you're interested in working with Occidental Arts and Ecology Center on some of these funding match stuff, and want to do projects with us, then the best way forward is to work with us with a general services agreement once you graduate part 1. This is a formal agreement that is like a umbrella contract that, time is of the essence when these things come up. You don't want to wait for several weeks to create a contract that's specific for that project. A general services agreement allows us to say, hey, email us what is the scope and cost of this project, and we can negotiate that more quickly and say, go for it. We've got the matching funds. We can pay for a site assessment, or however that works. So thank you. That's my overview. We'll have time in the field and maybe later today to talk to this a little bit more. And there's my contact information. You probably already have it. So thanks a bunch. I'm going to stop sharing. And went through a lot there, but I'm going to hand this over to Brock to talk a little bit about beaver history and natural history in California next. And if you have questions about what I just said, stick them in the chat too. I can do some chatting while we're sailing forward. Or write down your question. We can talk about it at some point.
Yay. Thanks, Gray. Everybody hear me?
Yep. Gotcha.
All righty. Is that on, let's see.
There you go. That's
Full screen?
Yep. Good.
All righty. Well, thanks everybody. So we just wanted to kind of kick this off with a quick intro, which we, think probably many of you have a sense of this, but just to set some larger time frame history around the history of beaver in California and a little bit of just natural history of beaver Castor canadensis themselves. And we love the work of Suzanne Husky. And if you don't know of her work, Kate's going to hopefully bring a book that she produced on this amazing work in France. But we just love her art. So just featuring that there, want to name and honor Suzanne's work. And as you all know, we at OAC have our Bring Back the Beaver campaign. It's a multifaceted campaign, and coexistence is really at the core of that. And so thank you all for really being central to this work here. But, in the context of history, just imagining and thinking back to the magnitude, specifically with beaver, of the beaver side that this continent has suffered, in thinking about the removal of somewhere between 60 to 400 million beavers were killed for their fur, for their castoreum, and as we'll talk a little bit later, just on behalf of the drainage of the continent, to the degree that there are estimates that roughly 10 to 20% of the surface area of the continent of North America was under some form of beaver water or beaver management at time of contact gives a lot of us pause to really ponder quite a bit. And then I think, as many of you may know, a number of us have worked on, back in 2012 and 2013, a series of peer-reviewed papers trying to better understand the historic ecology of beaver in California. And we put out an initial paper about the historic range of beaver in the Sierra Nevada, and then there's a second paper in 2013 about the historic range of beaver in coastal California. There's a couple other associated papers that look at this work, and so that map on the left there is an interesting map, because the areas with the hatch marks, say up there by the Shasta Klamath zone in the top end, that Central Valley, Sacramento, San Joaquin, a little bit of Delta Edge hatching, and then that hatch stuff down there along the Colorado where it touches California, is what was asserted back in the 1930s and 40s by Joseph Grinnell and Donald Tappy and others as their best sense of the range of beavers within California. And that didn't sit well with a number of us. And so thus we worked to answer those questions, not knowing, and those peer-reviewed papers in the California Fish and Game Journal is our best attempt. And so this map with that new area in green is what we have collectively proposed as we think was the range of beaver within California roughly at time of contact. And the department is currently working on their own updated status of that as part of their beaver management plan, and we look forward to that process. So very interesting there. And I think when we think a lot about history, and those of us engaged in restoration ecology at landscape scales, if you will, I think it's obviously important of what it was, and then kind of what happened to it when and where. And this is an interesting slide by Dr. Karen Pope, formerly of the U.S. Forest Service, but really acknowledging the time immemorial tribal stewardship of California and the resultant genocide of indigenous peoples is a fundamental primary legacy impact to California, and specifically the ecology hydrology of California. What is Dr. Rick Landman has called the California fur rush, which just wasn't just beaver, it was all marine fur, sea otters, fur seals, but specifically beaver along the coastal areas as early as the 1790s. And then I think many people more think of the mountain man trapper types, if you will, that really starts in the latter 1820s, the Jedediah Smiths, the Walkers, the Carsons, the Fremonts, those types of characters. And the systematic de-beavering of our coastal areas, our mountain meadows, our valleys and such, which by the time we get to the gold rush, any beavers that were left, those out of work gold miners, definitely worked on those guys. The interesting thing then of after you de-beavered mountain meadows and initiate the dewatering and the incision and the dehydration of especially mountain meadow systems, the arrival of massive overgrazing, especially mountain meadows, sheep being predominant in the early 1870s. Also, just the wholesale removal of woody vegetation through logging and removal of forests and woodlands and plowing of prairies. And then subsequent to that, I think we just have just overall agricultural, forestry, rangeland, urban suburbanization, development, and subsequent fire suppression are these fascinating process disturbance regimes, these degenerative disturbance regimes that we're all engaged with in various ways and have to, I think, be cognizant of. A couple other things that are worth noting for the history buffs out there is that also in our fetish nationally, our dehydration, degradation, desertification design fetish of taking this continent that had so much water, and where indigenous peoples all over the world understand that water is life, to basically drain the system for access to land for agriculture or other development. And specifically, as early as the 1850s, the Federal Swampland Act, or things like the 1861 state reclamation districts, and the draining of wetlands and the removal of beavers as a means of facilitating so-called progress is the legacy of those consequences that we're all facing today, I think, are myriad and untold. Interestingly, in California, and is that we in California, the Division of Wildlife, as it was called at that time, back in the 1920s, 30s, up to 1950, actually had this recognition as early as 1911 that in fact beavers were a special creature and warranted some protection. And so the legislature of California actually protected beavers as early as 1911, when the estimate was that the state's population was somewhere around 1,000 beavers. And so that kicked off this whole fascinating back and forth where they get protected in 1911, primarily the folks in the Delta, the agricultural folks. A decade later, by the 20s, were really mad at the beavers. So they kind of reversed that protection, killed a whole bunch of beavers, and the protections got reestablished by the 30s again. So there's this whole back and forth, imagine 100 years ago, on this question. And there's a whole process around that. Commensurate with that and subsequent to that was the fact that the Division of Wildlife began a whole process of beaver translocations across the state. And in fact, California translocated over 1,200 beavers across the state. And that's what this little map in the lower left is, where all the little dots are. We did. Most other Western states that were engaged in this didn't do more than 100 to 200 beavers. We were by far the greatest beaver relocator program in the nation at that time, up to 1950. And yes, a few years after the famous Idaho parachuting beavers of the 47, 48 window in 1950, California had its own beaver parachuting program, first up in the National Forest area, what would be El Dorado Forest area at this point. So very interesting history, but it complicates things in the narrative, the modern narrative post 1950 to now, the early mid 2000s, if you will, of what we often think about as California's 70-year beaver blind spot from 1950 to say 2020 or so, of this moment where we societally invested in big dams and big canals and big infrastructure and the post-World War II boom era, and beavers were a nuisance. And the assertion that they were not native, in addition to being a nuisance, is complicated because of that translocation program where beavers were put in certain areas by the state, and folks remembered that. And those who disagreed with those would assert that those beavers are not native, the government put them here. And so it's created this complicated scenario that we in California have been dealing with for a long time, very different than other states in the West. I think we don't need to spend much time on the biology, but I think you all know beavers are the second largest rodent. The North American beaver specifically is the second largest rodent on the planet after the capybara. The Eurasian beaver is number 3, and the giant porcupine of Africa is number 4 in the rodentia world as far as size goes. And that they're the colonies of animals, and we know we have adult groups with often 3 generations from kits to yearlings to subadult juveniles in those groups, and that they have these amazing characteristics and these incisors that can grow to 4 feet a year. And and the amazing, claws for grooming their waterproof fur. And so they're quite the cool critter. And we know that they, as beavers, are in essence, these semi-aquatic rodents that if they have big lakes and there's existing water and depth and protection and food, they will build that freestanding lodge out in the middle of the lake, which we don't have as many of in California, although we do have some, which is an image Kate took in the Sierras in the upper right of a lodge there. And we tend to have a lot more riverine beavers who that dam building initiative of theirs to hold back water and increase the depth of water for both protection from predators and inundation and irrigation and ease of access to food, which often results in them making bank burrowing habitats as a result of their adaptability or their behavioral plasticity. And it's often, as I think many of us know, a lot of confusion between our bank burrowing beavers and lodge building beavers, different beavers. And it's like, no, there's all Castor canadensis and they're just supremely adaptable in their behaviors. And the keystone species whereby the presence of beaver in the habitat that they create begets greater fecundity for more biodiversity, more species, more keystone processes of water and fire and resiliency over time. The benefits of beaver habitats and wetlands specifically to the sequestration and remediation of various pollutants such as sediment or other nutrients, like this phosphorus study that was done back in 2007 by Sarah Muskoff and Taylor Creek area of South Lake Tahoe is really interesting. And the carbon sequestration benefits as well is really interesting. And then I think there's been a lot of work looking at beaver dam complexes as speed bumps in the process of attenuating peak flows around flooding impacts, and also the other side of the Smokey the Beaver work of that Dr. Emily Fairfax and Whittle and et al. Have really put forward about the relationship of these green islands left after these big fires and the benefits those have to especially other wildlife and water quality, which is super exciting. And I think that these types of co-benefits where beaver is playing in the fire space, in the flood space, in the carbon sequestration space, the water quality space, the biodiversity, rare and threatened endangered species recovery space is indicative of them as a keystone and why so many people are interested in them in our society. There's been some fun work, and Kate and I, through the Sierra Meadows Partnership, have really pushed for quite a while for certain groups of folks, scientists, to really acknowledge the benefits of beaver. And so the willow flycatcher people, after some period of time, finally got it. And there's some really good reports, and here are two of them, and click on these QR codes if you need them, about the correlation between the presence of beaver dams per hectare and the presence of willow flycatchers very positively correlated, which is an important piece. The salmonid folks are working on this, Cascades frogs folks are working on this, and a number of other species. And so, and interestingly enough, it's not just beaver dams, but this really interesting study that was done up in the Smith River, looking at these bank burrowing beavers and the entrance to the banks of their bank lodges, and also the pile of sticks and chewed material out front of that was creating these river reefs that were being utilized by many species within these undammed systems as well, which is super interesting work. And so ultimately for us in OAC, we holistically think of beaver restoration in this variety of interventions, but absolutely coexistence for us is our first place to start. It's where we want to lead. Then we can talk about enhancing habitat, supporting expansion of beaver, doing beaver mimicry, PBR, and ultimately, obviously, relocation is a tool in the toolbox proportionately to the holistic framework of thinking about beaver writ large. And so you all know about Beaver Coexistence, and thank you for being here in this program. And we are, so excited to be really collaborating with all of us together to take this work forward right now. That's so critical. And I think with that, on behalf of OAC, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks a bunch, Brock. We had somebody just joined us, but we're going to go on 10-minute break as promised, but a little bit later than I thought. So let's take a break because this is a long, like 3 hours is too long to sit. So please get up, stretch, walk around, and we'll come back at 10:07. So please take the time to take a real break. Don't just check your email. Thanks. We'll be back soon. So we're going to start in a little under a minute. So you might want to get resituated. Resituate yourselves, please. We're going to really get into the meat of the meeting. I'm going to start talking in 30 seconds or so. So please get yourself back in your seats and comfortable. Just about to start again. And Kathy, I think you'll be up. Kathy's up next. Maybe I'll start us off just at the beginning, Kathy, for, where we're meeting and maybe some equipment. Yeah, I'll do those two things. All right, here we go. Welcome back. Hopefully that break was worth it. I've found through time with these kinds of things, it's important to break up a 3-hour meeting. So hopefully you got a breath. Yep, I see food being eaten, coffee or something being sipped. Good. That's what we were hoping for. So you all know we're going to meet at the Coexistence parking lot, right? At 8 in the morning on the 30th. Some of us will be staying together in a hotel, and others are in a bed and breakfast at about the halfway point. And then we're going to meet at the Coexistence parking lot at 8 a.m. And I shared with you a list that Mike provided of things that you should have with you, right? The attire and miscellaneous. The rest of the list is for your business. Right? So hopefully you will have this kind of attire, all that stuff, right? And then there's a reminder about what you take in the field anytime you go. Right? So hopefully that's all copacetic. And you'll field other questions on the chat or via email if you're unclear about just the beginning and the logistics, right? We'll be spending time at Coexistence the first day at 2 different sites, and then the next day we go to the southeast and spend time at another site that Kathy will be telling you a little bit about. But Kathy, you want to go into these sites a little bit? I think you've got a presentation to
Sure.
so you learn more about this.
Yeah, let me get this presentation up. And
there you are.
Okay, is that the view you expect?
Well, we got a little pop-up window that says continue. Yeah, I think you're going to close that out. There you go. Yep.
Okay.
Expect.
So hi everyone. I had the joy of helping to organize this training since this spring. And so I'm going to give you a quick orientation to our training sites so you know a little more about what to expect and you have a little bit of background on each of these sites. So they are the Stonebriar neighborhood in Dorado Hills, which is owned by a community services district, and the Coexistence River Preserve. Sorry, I'm reorganizing things on my screen. Okay. So the Stonebriar landowner concerns that we were originally contacted about involved flooding, loss of trees to chewing, and then just a general fear of increased mosquitoes due to stagnant water. Oh, of course. All right, there we go. This is an aerial view of the Stonebriar site. So Beaver Dam 2, Beaver Dam 3, Beaver Dam 1 is towards the bottom of this picture. This is obviously an older aerial photo that doesn't show the ponding, but there is ponding behind each of these dams. We are going to be working as a group on building 2 pond levelers for this neighborhood, but we are only installing a pond leveler in Beaver Dam 3. And this pond leveler helps to protect this house that is adjacent to the drainage. And there's also a sewage manhole that we don't want this pond to we don't want this pond to be any higher than it is and begin to mix with the sewage manhole cover. And then we will also be doing tree protection right along the fence with this neighboring landowner. This is a photo from the road above of the pond we are going to be working in. Of course, this time of year it looks much different. Leaves on the trees. And I think the pond has come up a little bit since this photo was taken. Our design for this pond leveler is perhaps a little different than what you've seen in your training. We're going to be using a dual wall pipe from the intake cage to the top of the dam. And I'll get into it later in our permitting section, but this pipe has to be lifted off of the floor of the pond to follow our permitting guidance. Okay, so to get to where we are now with this project, I just wanted to give you an idea of what was involved. So I had an initial meeting with the landowner to understand their needs. I ended up developing a presentation about beaver coexistence and possibilities to the board of the Community Services District. They took a vote and they very, very narrowly voted to go with coexistence. I had mentorship from Beaver Institute on how to move forward. The landowner applied for financial assistance from OAEC. We organized an agreement, a landowner agreement with OAEC. I developed a project description and then dove into permitting and CEQA. And then the materials purchase has happened and the delivery will happen this Sunday. So for the Casunas River Preserve site, at this site, it was this was brought to OAEC because of the land manager's concerns with the site. This is a managed wetland where they raise the pond levels every winter and then let them drain out in the spring to create habitat for both migrating birds and shorebirds in the spring. That's why they need those levels to go down in the spring. And so the beavers are piling mud and debris on the water control structures and preventing the release of that water in the spring. The beavers would like to keep all of the water in the ponds. And they are also burrowing into the levee roads. This is an aerial view of that site. The location we'll be meeting at is down here, kind of off the image to the right of Franklin Boulevard. And then we'll be driving out on these levee roads to these different sites. So at this location, we will be installing a beaver backsaver device. That's water control structure 2A north. And at water control structure 3A south, we will be installing a fence and pipe design. This is a photo from the pond of water control structure 3A south, and you can see how debris is piled up against the boards, making the management of this water control structure very difficult. This is an approximate representation of what the fence and pipe situation will look like at that water control structure to be modified in the field. This is a view standing on the levee road of the water control structure where we will be installing the beaver backsaver. And today, as we speak, our wetland manager is digging with a backhoe this little peninsula so that we will be able to install a 20-foot long pipe out from this water control structure. And I guess when we're on site, we'll get into more of the backstory of why this is happening at the very last minute. But it involves clever beavers, we'll say. These are images from OAEC of what a beaver backsaver design looks like. So the pipe on ours will most likely be longer than this pipe. And then these diagrams can be found on OAEC's website. So prep to get to this point for Casumanas River Preserve. We met with the land manager to understand their needs. We did an assessment visit. I actually had to go back twice because I realized my measurements weren't quite good enough for the precision of the beaver back saver design on the first visit. I spent time talking with BLM permitting representatives and getting to know what the need was there, which I'll talk about more in the permit presentation. I wrote a project description. We worked on a landowner agreement, had mentorship from the Beaver Institute. I put out a request for proposals for the beaver back saver and chose a manufacturer. We did a test fit to make sure everything would work well during our training. And then I've worked on material sourcing and delivery to the site is happening tomorrow. And we'll talk more about the specifics of permitting for both of these sites in a minute. And that's it.
Thanks, Kathy. And we want to open the floor to any questions about either sort of my logistical kind of agenda stuff or for Kathy's background on what she just said. Raise your hand if you've got a question, either the virtual hand or your own hand. If you've got a video thing, many of you have shut off your videos, so I can't see your hands. Of course, you got to raise your virtual hand. Lana, yes, you got both hands up there for a second.
For a second. Well, I was curious about the meeting you had with the Community Services District, and it sounded like you said it narrowly passed for them to vote to do this. So I was just curious if you could share a bit more of kind of what you presented to them, what responses you were getting, and what you saw as helping get that narrow success that can help others of us learn from that.
Yeah. So I gave a full presentation with benefits of beaver coexistence, what that brought to the neighborhood, if they chose to go that direction. I shared that they currently had well-behaving beavers in their neighborhood. They had previously had beavers that were causing more problems for them than this current set of beavers. I shared with them the idea from our Beaver Institute training that repeated trapping and removal ends up being more expensive over time than coexistence. So all of those things to steer them towards coexistence. In the end, for this group, I believe it was the fully funded installation or the mostly fully funded installation that tipped the scales in the direction of coexistence. And that probably won't be an option in the future for that same presentation. And I have heard from others that HOAs and CSDs are more difficult to work with than just a single landowner who already has the intention of doing coexistence, because you have so many opinions in the room. And especially in a suburban neighborhood, I think people choose that neighborhood for a reason, and a lot of that is around tidiness. So the idea that you're going to allow this chaos maker into the space is really scary for a lot of folks, and they want to protect their investments. So
thanks for the question. Lana, does that get at what you were wondering about, or did you have something more? You got it.
No, I mean, that's what I was wondering about. But with that, I'm just kind of curious because I imagine that'll be an issue in a lot of circumstances with these HOAs, and it's more community-run groups and a lot of opinions. So I'm just curious going forward if there's going to be more ability for funding for those kind of things so that people are more likely to be like, okay, there's a financial incentive. But that was great. Thank you for the answer to the question.
Yeah, thanks.
And I would just add that I think in the room during that meeting, it was about half and half. It was really close. Those who would have Without that funding, probably nearly half of them still would have voted for coexistence. There's like an emotional component too. So not to erase all hope.
Okay, so there is hope beyond money. Good.
Absolutely.
Yep, thank you. And as far as our ability to provide funding, the timeline is really our last spending is going to be in February of 2027 for this project, for what we've got right now. That's a tight timeline. We got to do a lot of projects in the meantime. We are, with that coexistence response plan, we're going to really cogitate on this kind of thing. Is financial incentive crucial? And maybe, and in the meantime, we're going to be looking for more funding, right, in general. But this is, not cheap work. And anyway, so Jordan and/or Geneva, and then Laurel. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious about, when you were in the room, what are like the actual specifics of folks being concerned about putting in these devices for the coexistence strategy? Like, what were some of the conversations you were hearing?
So it's easy for us to understand why people want coexistence, because most of us here, we are here because we understand that reasoning. And what was surprising to me, for example, I thought it would be a great idea to share this link. It's an animated scene where you have a straight line stream running through a grassy, hilly area, and beavers move in and they build a dam. Pond backs up, and then in walks an elk. Of course, that's not going to happen in most places in California. And then the fish show up and the frogs show up and all this life shows up. And to me, that's beautiful. I found out in that meeting that's not the right thing to share in that setting. So we're going to all find over time what the tips and tricks are. But as I said earlier, I think people choose this living situation in suburbia for a reason. And they have control of their living space. And the fears involve ponded water and disease from mosquitoes, or just having to deal with mosquitoes. And of course, property damage. And there just seems to be a general fear of not being able to control the life in their neighborhood. A commonly mentioned problem during that meeting was they wanted to see the flow of water. They just didn't want water to sit still. They wanted it to flow. And these beaver ponds you're going to see next week, they are full of bullfrog tadpoles. They are full of little fish. There are no mosquitoes getting out of these ponds and into the neighborhood. They are being eaten. So that's not a real fear, but just the perception that water needs to move to be healthy, I think was a big part of how they were voting.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kathy. Let's see. Silas and then River. Oh, well, Laurel did. Yeah, Laurel.
I put my hand down.
Yeah.
I just was curious, what was your experience with BLM and their engagement and process of working with you on it?
Great. They are fantastic. They want to experiment with this. Very easy to gain access. Very helpful through the permitting part, the permitting discussion. So yeah, great.
Yeah. And part of that I think is their mission is for restoration and management for all this wildlife, but also I've had a long-term like 30-year relationship with one of the partners there and some of the founders of that thing. So there's this background of trust and understanding that probably is also important there, right? So yeah, many of us have long relationships with people in these spheres, so it's worth working on those. So let's see, Silas and then River. Silas, you're
yeah. So one of the questions in the theoretical part when we were getting into like the business stuff was about the permitting. And so you guys were saying basically, hey, what are the permitting requirements in your local area? And so I started trying to track all that down and having some conversations with some people in the permitting offices. And one thing that was mentioned to me was that you can apply for these like larger, like general purpose permits, right? So for there should be a way to basically say like, okay, we have this project where we're trying to do beaver restoration and beaver conflict management, and we're going to be doing these particular activities. We don't know exactly where the project is going to be located yet, but we're saying we want to do 5,000 acres or something. We're just picking some number, target number, and saying this is the amount of area that we're going to cover in this permit, right? And then once that permit, you go through the permitting process and it gets approved, that just makes it really, really easy to do the work. So you don't have to do permitting on a per project basis, right? Which really increases overhead load for us running the business, as well as increases the costs for the consumer and drains the grant money faster, right?
Yeah.
So it may be a good idea to us as this first group going through form some sort of co-op and apply for the permit through the co-op, right? And then we as individual partners within the co-op taking charge of our own projects with there's no profit sharing between it or whatever, right? It's just really simple, right? Just like we're saying, this is this entity, we're combining our resources to into these things like say insurance for this work as well, right? Would be another place where we could get some cost savings, right?
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So anyway, I just thought that was worth sharing while the whole group is here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Maybe one more question from River.
Sure. Just similarly, more interested in the permitting side of things, and like which institutions did you contact for permitting questions, and also the raising the pipe off of the bottom of the stream bed. How common is that of a requirement that comes up?
Well, what a great segue into the next talk, right? So maybe, yeah, lots of energy around that, and we should probably move that direction anyway. So maybe you can cover that during your talk. Thanks, River. And I think, yeah, emphasize that, Kathy, when you get to it. So
sure. Are we ready for
ready?
That?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Do it.
Oh.
It's coming our way. It says it's started screen sharing, so it's loading. Hold on.
On my end, it's telling me it's paused.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you better start over.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah, we're having a little back chat behind the scenes here with some of the organizers, and we're all super impressed with all of you being here today. It's nice to hear your questions and get a sense of what we're doing in California with beaver coexistence. So impressive. Thank you so much for dedicating part of your lives to this initiative. It's great. Kathy,
Okay.
there it is. Yep. And then
I think I'm getting there.
Slideshow view, which is under view, the view tab. There you go. Oops, not that one.
No, it's not.
No, it's on the
there.
slideshow.
There we go. Slideshow. Play from start. Okay.
There you go.
Here we go.
Good.
Um, so I do not claim to be an expert, but I'm going to share with you my experience in permitting getting permits for the Stonebriar project and working through permitting concerns for the Cosumnes River Preserve. And I'm going to share this as a PDF also. It has clickable links that can take you to potential contacts. So each project is unique. I do like the idea of finding any way to streamline permitting of these types of projects for our group, for our cooperative group. But we do have to understand that each project is unique. Each region has different regulators, species concerns, and hydrology. So different issues will come up. I'd like to see us build a professional cohort that agencies trust. And we can do this by always having clear communication, making best efforts, and taking action with integrity. Of course, no permits needed would be the ideal for efficiency during coexistence emergencies and actually anytime we're doing coexistence work. So first of all, like, why do we even need to do this? Permits and the process of communicating with regulating agencies gives us guidance to protect the environment, helps us avoid unintended harm to an area. These permits also generate revenue to pay for agency staff. And I think that's something that is good to keep in mind as you're working through it and having communication. This allows agencies to track projects, and there are probably other reasons to do this as well. Yeah, let's see. So I want to start with point positive. And this is how I was thinking through things as I was working through this process. I thought about the outcome I wanted to have through the permitting process, and I nudged in that direction as politely as possible while communicating with agency staff. And so one little phrase came up through this permitting process that I think is really helpful for all of us as we work through this work. And that is, we are sustaining aquatic habitat that would otherwise be lost. I think we should all commit that to memory as we're having these conversations, because otherwise agency representatives might tell you this doesn't fit into restoration. You know, we're not like restoring something, the animal is restoring something, but as humans, by taking this action, we are sustaining that aquatic habitat. And generally, through this process and also my other work doing meta restoration, I have found that agency staff who are doing this work, they can generally be thought of as partners for restoration and coexistence projects. They would like to see it happen also. They got into this work because they love the environment, they love functional ecology. So think of them as partners. Keep all communication timely, positive, and professional. And by timely, I mean, don't let an email sit. It comes into your inbox, turn it around within a couple of days so that you keep that process moving forward. So the first steps before you are communicating with agency staff, you're going to do your assessment visit. You're going to figure out who the landowner is. You're going to figure out if it's someplace like Cosumnes River Preserve or some other managed wetland situation or city staff situation. You're going to figure out if they already have a routine maintenance agreement that would cover you for the work that you want to do. You're going to draft a project description that you can share in multiple directions that kind of holds the idea for the project, but it is a draft because it will be tweaked through your conversations into its final form. And so your question as you're working through it, are permits actually needed? Is CEQA review and action needed? If you are receiving funding through OAC and through the CDFW grant? I believe the answer for the CEQA part is always going to be yes, because it is funding from the state. Let's see, you need to figure out what else lives there. And so these two linked tools are a way to look at CDFW's natural diversity database and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife information for planning and consultation, which can give you an idea of the rare and endangered species that might be present at your site. And there are probably other concerns to think about as well. So I want to say, cherish the relationships you build. Keep phone numbers and emails for future communication, because these lists that are linked below, the regional contacts for each, it takes you a little bit to get to a real human by going through these links. But once you build that relationship, definitely cherish it. So these are just listed ways. So you're going to need to contact State Water Resources Control Board to figure out if you need a 401. You're going to need to contact U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to see if you need any type of 404 permitting. And their website instruction tells you to request a pre-application meeting to discuss your project. California Department of Fish and Wildlife, I'm hoping we hear more from them going forward. But right now, I've been told it's going to be a self-certification process that takes care of the stream bed alteration permitting. And then CEQA review is needed if there's discretionary approval. So if an agency needs to decide to give you a permit or not, and also if state funding or is given for the project. So your likely path for that is a notice of exemption, and that always needs a lead agency. A lead agency is someone who has a discretionary part of the project or a funding part of the project. And for the Stonebriar location, we were very happy to work with our local resource conservation district. And they provided some funding for signage and bench, and they were able to serve as our CEQA lead. All right, so if you're curious later, I won't pull it up right now, but we have the whole project description for the Stonebriar project linked. And then this photo that I shared with you earlier basically shows you what we are doing at the Stonebriar site. And there was a question about the pipe and it being elevated off the bottom. So I'll back up for a second here. As we dove into permitting for this project, we started going down a path that was going to become very expensive very quickly. Army Corps of Engineers wanted us to do a non-notifying nationwide permit 18. If we had done that, the State Water Resources Control Board would have required that we did a 401 through them, and they did not think this was a restoration project, which automatically bumped our permit cost up to over $4,000. We realized that expensive of a permit for a single pond leveler installation is a way to kill all of this work very quickly, because the average landowner is not going to be able to pay that kind of a permit cost. And the impacts to a drainage and a site from this type of work shouldn't require that level of permitting oversight. So we went back to the Army Corps and said, is there any way we can tweak this design so that we wouldn't need a permit? And the design as shown is not considered fill material by the Army Corps, by my Army Corps contact, I should clarify, by my Army Corps contact. And the secret is in raising this pipe off the bottom of the pond so that it can't trap sediment and change the topography of the bottom of the pond. And so this pipe is going to be supported by T-post brackets so that water and sediment can still flow beneath the pipe and it doesn't change the shape of the bottom of the pond. By doing this and having the Army Corps of Engineers decide that no permit was required for installing this pond leveler, that meant that the State Water Resources Control Board also decided that no permit was needed for this project. So that got us through both of those hurdles. And I think going forward for other locations, other projects, we can gently point back to this example. It's going to be a conversation for a while until we have a well-established path. So these are just the final actual path that was taken at Stonebriar. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, no permit required letter was given to us. State Water Resources Control Board, we had a project will not affect letter from them. CDFW, we had an email to proceed with the project as planned. And then we know that there's a plan for self-certification. And then for CEQA, the Resource Conservation District assisted us with a notice of exemption. For the Cosumnes River Preserve, the project description for that is linked here as well. These are the two actions we're taking at the preserve. We're installing a fence and pipe. We're installing a beaver backsaver. Both of these actions fit within their existing routine management agreement that they have established at the site. And they did a long process to understand all the impacts of all the different types of actions that might be needed. And if you want to read more about the rationale for no additional permits needed at this site, I have a document linked there that you can look through. So in conclusion, I want us to remember that through these beaver coexistence efforts, we are sustaining aquatic habitat that would otherwise be lost. And in my mind, the eventual goal for this type of work in California is that no permits are needed. And this would be a path that allows us to take care of emergency situations and makes things affordable for those individual landowners, because the work itself, the materials and the work of a contractor are already expensive enough for landowners to choose this route, and adding permit fees on top of that makes it somewhat unreachable. I've linked some additional resources. One is Sustainable Conservation's Accelerating Restoration Permitting Help Guide. And the top link is a Google group that I set up, which I would like to add everyone to that's on this call. So I'm wondering if you don't want to be part of the group, if you could just email Gray and let him know that you do not want to be part of that Google group. And otherwise, I will be adding your emails to that Google group. And that's it.
Thanks, Kathy. Great stuff. I'll add, just so everyone knows, so you kind of got this thing where there's a site assessment, then there's a draft project description, then there's these conversations with your network of permitters, right? You get through, you finally get all the permits, you get a final project description. And if you're working with us with the funding, one step that you should know about is then we take all that stuff and send it to our grantors, right? And they then have to issue a notice to proceed before we're allowed to move forward. And that doesn't take much time as long as everything's well documented. We've done it well, so we haven't run into any situations there. But just heads up, that's one more step for our funded work in this project. Lana, and then Cooper, and then David.
First, thanks, Kathy, for all this great work. And I'm curious because you mentioned the BIOS tool with CDFW and looking for what other species are in an area. And when I was at SRF this year, I was talking with someone who I believe works with the RCD down near Santa Ynez, so probably Santa Barbara County, down near Cooper. And they were removing beaver dams because of, I believe, yellow-legged frog habitat or red-legged frog habitat because they don't want bullfrogs in the area. So you were mentioning, bullfrogs in beaver ponds. I'm curious if you or anyone else has run into that issue with agencies of not wanting beaver ponds in an area because of bullfrog habitat, and what other kinds of coexistence measures could exist so that we're reducing bullfrog habitat with beavers, if anyone has ideas.
So first, Kathy, and then has anybody else experienced this?
I don't have direct experience with agencies requesting removal of beaver dams because of bullfrog. I do have experience with bullfrogs, and they are everywhere all the time, and I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah. Anybody else run into this with a potential coexistence or other restoration project resistance because of invitations to bullfrogs?
Great. I've permitted, planned and managed a couple of bullfrog and green sunfish removal projects in the Mendocino area, not necessarily adjacent to any beaver, existing beaver activity or beaver colonies. However, Kathy kind of said it, like bullfrogs are not necessarily drawn to specific habitat as much as they will utilize any habitat that can support them. So I think, for bullfrogs, it's pretty much just straight removal, whether it's dewatering and a rotenone, application, or, the most effective thing is plinking them. Like you'll have a crew go out on a boat or on banks and shoot them with, 22 caliber air rifles. That's pretty much the only thing that really is effective. So I don't think that removing beaver habitat would make, that big of an impact except locally.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, David. And Brock, did you have your hand up too? Or yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say the three B's of bullfrogs, bass, and bluegill is one of the or green sunfish. What is as I think I agree with David's point. They're everywhere. It's a really big conundrum. Draining ponds for tadpoles, seining ponds, shooting bullfrogs, trapping bullfrogs, putting a bounty on them, and then funding chefs to create bullfrog leg recipes and such is a good thing that other invasive species folks have done, like the lionfish work in the Caribbean, I think. So we're gonna all have to get creative because the San Ynez bullfrog, bass, and bluegill game down there is really intense. But they blame the beavers and the beaver dams, but it's a flow controlled system because the human-made dam upstream is what's regulating the flows and allowing for the very large beaver dams to almost persist in an unnatural way to create that really big habitat for these species that are affecting or perceived to be affecting southern steelhead down there. So it's complicated, and we all have to be on our game in every location for it.
Thanks, Brock. And I think that Lana's point is this is just one potential friction point for people who are giving permits for maintaining beavers, as they might be concerned about bullfrogs. And here you have some opening lines to start building those relationships and logical arguments and so forth. I'm sure we'll continue to build those. Cooper, you're up next, and then David's got his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I was wondering, Kathy, if there were any fish in the system and if people were concerned about fish passage through the flow devices.
This is a tributary creek to a perennial creek. Before development, this is an ephemeral creek. It's mostly the water is coming from summer irrigation runoff. So there are tiny little fish that people have introduced. I think they're mosquito fish, but there are no fish concerns on this particular drainage.
Kathy, maybe a little more there. Is that something you had to analyze and present to the permitters, or is that something they might have brought to you for the project, or how did this subject come up for you during the permitting process?
It just wasn't brought up as a concern, I believe, because it is an ephemeral tributary to a creek, and so easily passed over by agency folks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. David, you're next.
Yeah, I don't know if I might have missed this in your presentation, Kathy, but I have permitted BDA structures through the streamlined permitting pathway, HREA, and then, kind of just want to tap into, what are they calling it? Cutting the green tape, the new initiative from California Department of Natural Resources. Do you think that there's any way to maybe down the line kind of work the coexistence implementation work into that streamlined permitting pathway, just so you were kind of saying, no permitting would be the ultimate goal, but even if we could get around some of the major permitting hurdles, just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So we looked at that direction, and that direction through the water board was still going to cost us over $1,000 for a permit.
Okay.
And so there was resistance to calling it restoration and making it fit that model, and it would still cost $1,000 per pond level or for the permit. And so the goal was to shift away from that. But I think, we're going to revisit this as we're looking at different sites and working through the process.
Mm-hmm. David, does that get at your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was just my bigger concern is from a consulting standpoint, permits are the most expensive aspect sometimes of implementing really low cost work. So it does seem like that could be an impediment to landowners, especially private landowners, going forward with this sort of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I'll add that we do have a bucket of money in our current grant to cover some of the permitting costs. So as we all spread the word about what we can do with our current grant, please know that we can help overcome some of the permitting costs with this, with some of the grant funding we've got. Andrew, yeah.
Sorry, Greg, can I just add a comment there?
Please.
If you're backed into a corner and you have to spend a bunch of money on permitting, that sounds great. But my concern with this project for this training was setting a precedent for future work that would cause all of us to have high permitting costs.
Let's try and avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by calling the Army Corps of Engineers first and having those conversations is what I learned. Andrew, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna comment kind of on the fish passage issue. Is I've kind of run into that as well, but that was another conversation ago. So, but yeah, I've run into like other species becoming somewhat of a more concern than the overall coexistence.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Kathy, did you want to talk at all? I know you've been thinking about fish passage with another site assessment that you're working on.
I don't have much to add there except that other groups have done way more in this area. So Beavers Northwest is a good group to look at, and the Beaver Institute does have information on their website as well.
About beaver coexistence projects that can allow fish passage, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Do we have other questions on anything you've heard so far? We've got a few minutes to cover questions, and this will be, you'll get to ask Valerie some questions about her presentation after that, but this is your moment to ask any questions about anything you've heard so far today. Make sure you're well prepared for our field day, that you feel like you deeply understand the backstories to what we're going to do. All that is pertinent. And I'm going to sit here and let you cogitate on what your next question is. Yeah, Cooper.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kathy, your Google link about permits, the local nonprofit here, the Slow Beaver Brigade, I think they'd be interested in doing permitting for these projects. So would you mind if I sent you their email to add to that list as well?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, Laurel, your hand's up.
Question about fundraising and how we can also participate in that for this project and OEC in general, by kind of spreading out into our own networks of people who maybe want to donate.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I'd let Kate or Brock talk about the OAC donation connections if you had an answer there, and I have some other ideas if you don't want to step up right now. Looking for you to take mute off. There you go, Brock. Or Kate's too. Kate's there, maybe.
I mean, sure, I can start. Yeah, we're in the process of identifying potential funding sources moving ahead. And so anyone who has connections with ideas around that, programs that they are currently receiving funding from already or know about that would be compatible with what we're trying to do here, definitely reach out to us and let us know. And yeah, it's going to be a group effort to continue to see this through since we're creating such an amazing program right now and we want to see it funded. Brock, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's just the fun part about trying to fundraise for Beaver is the creativity around who are all those folks out in the world who, as of yet, don't see themselves as benefiting from beavers. And again, the fish folks, the fire folks, the water quality folks, the carbon folks. So really diversifying our outreach and engagement with the plethora of other philanthropic or public funding agencies out there to see how Beaver can help them with their goals or their mandates, and thus supporting our work is a de facto way of getting at what they're trying to do, the good work in the world. And so that's never a dull moment, and we welcome everybody's creative input on thoughts about other entities, especially foundations and such, that we haven't really thought about because they're not traditionally perceived of as the quote Beaver space.
Yep. I will add that it's our intention to continue this Beaver Coexistence training and support program. Again, the current funding ending in March of 2027. So yes, what Kate and Brock just said, that pertains to people who want to leverage funds for our program right now. And I would also say, sort of to Silas's point, if you're working in a region, and we have some priority counties in southern and Sacramento Valley and northern San Joaquin Valley, if you're working in those regions, and you, like Kathy, are building a relationship with your resource conservation district that works in that area, they have deep experience with projects like this. And any way that you might have a partnership with them and look for fundraising regionally through their connections, with their trusted connections with landowners, farmers, ranchers, that might also be very important. I would suggest that that is an important avenue for continuing this work, especially in those areas where beavers are currently with so many conflicts. So I want to encourage that, and let us know if we can help with any of that. We're working on it. Silas, I think your hands up.
Yeah, just talking about funding sources. I have a mentee down here in San Diego who has been heavily involved with like the Rotary Club for many, many years. He gets grants and stuff through the Rotary Club for doing all sorts of different things. And he is heavily into regenerative agriculture as being, like this thing that, humanity needs moving forward. And so he's a big champion of that. I told him about what was going on with the beaver stuff in California. And he did say to me that, reach out to him if, I need help with anything beaver related. So it was he definitely sees the value there. And he's very, very connected within the civic service community in San Diego County. So people like that as well, I think, are worth looking for.
Absolutely. That sounds great. And let us know, Silas, if that's something you want to connect us to channel to this program, or we can see other ways that this can be leveraged for local, and other initiatives. Thank you. Lana, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, well, right after the training next week, I'm going to be in the Bay Area meeting with some folks that are part of this Human Flourishing Endowment. And I was just going to see if anyone else is going to also be in Berkeley or San Francisco on the 2nd and might want to come and speak with them. There's a few different, both foundations, endowments, and some nonprofits that have funding for foodways and just human relationship with landscapes, which I see human-beaver coexistence as a pretty vital part of that. So if anyone else wants to come and talk with some potential donors with me, let me know.
All right. Thanks for that invitation. Unfortunately, our team is going to be wrapped up. I mean, some of you might know, but guess what? So we're installing on the 30th and 1st, right? On the 2nd, we've got 50 people in Sprinter vans from 8 permitting agencies, big landowners, other RCD types, everyone that's sort of low-hanging fruit that might join our movement. It's important for them to know what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. They're going to tour what we installed. So we're leading them on a tour so they understand they got eyes on the different coexistence strategies and they can help move this stuff forward. They'll understand more. So we're busy on the 2nd doing that, looking at our work with a bunch of important people. So we can't be there on October 2nd, but maybe somebody here can. Other questions? Other concerns? Any loose ends here about our training? How we got permitting? We're going to speak to the land managers a little bit in the field, so you'll get more discussion about their resolve for their reflections on these projects, including from the Community Services District. Yes. All right. Other questions? No? It's hard to have dead air on this kind of thing because it just seems boring, but it's important for us to sit. Yeah, Kathy.
I just wanted to reinforce your cheerleading for connecting with the RCD in your local area. So the Fish and Wildlife Commission is part of the RCD, and I was invited at the last minute to present at our local Fish and Wildlife Commission a couple weeks ago. And the wheels started turning for me, and I realized I should be connecting with all of the local RCDs and their commissions, because these are the folks that are connected to their community. And when Joe down the road calls and has a concern about beavers, they're having the initial conversation. So if you can engage them to come see your sites and understand your work, then you have a bigger network into the community.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And one of the RCD people who are coming on October 2nd backed out, and he's the head of one of the RCDs. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to miss you. I'm sure you're busy. Let us know how we can help." And this person really understood beaver coexistence, have looked into it. And I think, like so many RCDs, like right now, the private landowners are just shooting the beavers. They're upset. They don't want the beavers. But he goes on to say, "I know there's a parks district that we can get started in." So even the RCDs probably know the place to start working in their community to demonstrate how this works. And that's what we need to do. Low-hanging fruit. Where do we demonstrate the viability of this stuff within people's local community? And the RCDs are a good ticket to know the person to talk to about that. Thanks, Kathy. Brock, and then Jordan or Geneva.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and kind of build on Kathy's point about, in addition to the RCDs, is she mentioned this thing called the Fish and Wildlife Commissions. And there's a statewide commission, but every county, or not all counties, because I'll tell you why, have these local county Fish and Wildlife Commissions. And I served on Sonoma County's appointed Fish and Wildlife Commission for 20 years. And they are all funded based on fine monies. So CDFW, Regional Water Board, busts somebody for an environmental crime, poaching, water quality violation, and the Fish and Wildlife Commissions get a percentage of that money. Each county has its own different way it works and the amounts of money it gets. Tragically, I would say Sonoma County was one of the best funded Fish and Wildlife Commissions in the state because we have a lot of environmental crimes here and people getting busted for that. And so we were giving out, 50 to 100K a year. And the grants where you show up at the board, you pitch a 2-page grant at one meeting and you come back the second meeting and you either get the money or you don't, and we cut you a check. And it's all about education, restoration, and we also funded enforcement stuff for the various agencies doing the enforcement. And so in Sonoma County, it's a really easy grant, and it always felt to me like when and if, and what we really like to fund was oftentimes the parts. So imagine a flow control device, like buying all the pipes and the cages and the wire and the T-post. We love that kind of stuff. And so check in all the counties you're working in, tune up on those Fish and Wildlife Commission meetings. Some of them, we met monthly in Sonoma County, some only meet annually. Each one's different. How much money are different, but they are a really interesting resource. And I will say on the Sunrise Club thing that we've gotten several grants through these. The Rotary Club have these little sunrise groups. That's a subset, and that's an easy pitch, and you can get $1,000 out of those locally in Sonoma County, pretty easy there. So yeah, lots of fun opportunities for funding.
Thank you. Thanks, Brock. Geneva?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's thoughts or curiosities or concerns, if any, so on the avoiding the Army Corps of Engineer permit by raising the pipe off the ground and putting it so it's not considered fill. And maybe Mike has some insight on this, but like knowing how well that holds up, if that has the same kind of sense of longevity as a product as kind of his tried and true implementation model, and is that potentially setting precedent that they will all become that in order to avoid the permit piece. And so I don't know, and I'm just curious if anyone's been thinking about that or had thoughts around that.
Well, let me chime in because I've worked with the Corps of Engineers on wetland delineation and their regulations in the past. Now, just let you know, you'll be lucky if if the T-posts aren't considered fill. So this is a relationship and education building thing, but that some people read the rules differently, and it really depends on the person. They don't have like these people are like running permits, all day long. They're spinning. They've got a process, and they're not like coming to a consensus organization wide about any of this. They're looking at specifics in each project and coming to their conclusion about what the letter of the law means. And so that's at least my beginning. Like, you have to understand that this fill was because people were putting posts and pilings in the middle of harbors and things and making it so that people's boats would get wrecked. And so this is about navigable waterways, and the rules are the rules, and anything that gets in the way of that navigability is potentially a problem regulatorily. The fact that they went to what Kathy was saying, which is, well, you don't want aggradation, like, okay, that's kind of an enlightened thing, actually. And so, you have to understand that people are in it, like Kathy said, because they're really interested in the environment and they want to do good, but you got to work with those relationships. I don't know. That's my initial take. And Kathy, did you want to add? Okay, Jeremy too. Jeremy maybe first because Kathy's chimed into this. Yeah.
Oh, I just felt obligated to say a few things about working for the RCD. And it's literally the best job I've had in my life. And I've left at times because grant funding becomes tough and then layoffs usually come, and it's based on the economy or the recession or whatever change in administration. And those are things you can't really control. But I've always came back because I work with the best people. We do such a diversity of projects. We work with so many willing landowners, and it's generally always a good experience. And we're grant funded, so we don't make as much people in like working for a federal agency. But so we're kind of a training ground for people. We have a high turnover of staff that come, get a bunch of great experience from field work all the way up to project management. And then they move on to a bigger, better, high paying job. But we also recruit a lot of people that are at the end of their career and they are either retired and decided they still want to work, or they've been in an agency like our forester. He just got tired of doing clear cuts. So he wanted to work at the RCD to get back into doing more diverse restoration type of work. And the same with, we have a retired Army Corps of Engineer employee working here because he just got tired of telling people no, they couldn't do stuff, and he wanted to work for the RCD and help us get more yeses, you know. So those are the type of people we work with, and it's a huge team here. Everybody's working towards the same goal. I've worked at other places. It gets all frictional between, like at the park, you've got, you know, maintenance divisions and resource management, and those people are always at odds with each other. But this is a real 100% teamwork organization.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thanks a bunch, David, for the pitch for RCDs. We found that to be the case, you know, many places. I want to bring back the question to Geneva's, which is, yeah, is there any concern about, you know, how we manage as a community, you know, across Army Corps areas, like this concern Kathy also raised about setting precedent with any of the agencies about any of this. Kathy, did you want to weigh in on any more on that? Did you have things to add?
Well, I think Geneva's specific question was about longevity of the supported pipe versus it being on the bottom. So I would like to hear Mike and Aaron's take on that. And I would also add that this particular landowner refused the maintenance agreement. So we will get to see over time what naturally happens with this setup. And it's a bit of an experiment, I think.
Thanks. Anybody else on this sort of question? Well, Mike, you've been invited to talk about the longevity of this installation, and I saw your hand up anyway.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I can tell you that we haven't ever had that requirement. So all I can talk is theoretically. We have had our Fish and Wildlife years ago installed pipes through beaver dams and supported them with fence posts, and those were metal culverts though, and stayed suspended for years and years and years and still are. But my I don't think it's going to be an issue as far as the functioning of the pipe. It's going the at each we'll talk more about this in the field, but at each support, it's going to be X T-posts that the pipe's resting on. That the fence posts are wired together and then wired over the top, I think, is what Kathy and I decided, and that should be secure the pipe enough where if we have it close enough, there shouldn't be any significant sagging, but only time will tell. But I do think it's going to be okay as far as the functioning, and should be good for many years, but time will tell.
Geneva, you thumbs up if you got your question answered. Did you have more of it? Yep. Okay. Thanks. Let's see. Then Kate, I think you had your hand up, and then Nikki, and then Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, so much of this is just continued capacity building and education of both our regulators and also potential funding sources. And so that's on all of us to continue to get creative about how we articulate what we're doing and, you know, what experiments we take on, et cetera. I know early on we supported a landowner actually in going after some funding from the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they got an EQIP grant to put in a pond leveler. And when the NRCS sent out their person to confirm the design, she was an engineer, and she said the only way we're going to fund this is if you put in a concrete pad to support the pond leveler. And so that was going to be like a $15,000 expense or something, really like unattainable. And so we realize there's a lot of education that needs to happen out here on all parts of the equation. And so that landowner ended up refusing the grant, and just we did it as per usual, and it's still there performing wonderfully. And so, you know, this is where having site tours of existing sites to bring out both the regulators and the funders to continue to educate them and have these roundtables and questions, you know, answered and see them over time. And so this is good to hear, you know, that they are refusing the that, whatever you're calling it, the service agreement, so that we can see what happens and learn from it together and document that and have that add to our collective conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kate. Nikki.
Hi. Yeah, in like researching the permitting process, like for the Lake Tahoe Basin is where I was looking into it. I'm a little bit overwhelmed as I understand we're trying to streamline that, but there's some requirements in there to satisfy some of the permitting, such as like wetland delineation. And I'm just curious if that's something that we are expected to do, or if that's something that a permitting agency does the wetland delineation for some of these projects. Because I was just thinking about doing wetland delineation, and there's so many different ways to do it and who wants what kind and kind of things like that. So just kind of curious, like I haven't been directly involved in permitting processes, always kind of secondarily knowing that other people have to do it and trying to like link languages. But actually, like the actual process, I'm just wondering if the permitters are the ones that send somebody out to make sure it satisfies all of their environmental requirements and that it is a wetland and all that.
Okay. Kathy's got her hand up, so go for it.
Yes. So in my experience with other projects, wetland delineation, if it's needed, is the project proponent's responsibility. So you would either need to do it yourself if you're trained in it, or find funding to pay someone to do it.
And Nikki, I'm curious as to how this would come up with this beaver coexistence work. Did you figure out where that issue would have arisen?
I have to go through my notes because it's like the first pass of pulling all the parts. But I think it was from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, the TERPA is a special entity up there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So, the permits that Kathy mentioned with the Army Corps and the regional board, those permits are assuming you're working in a wetland. Right. So, yeah, there might be some local ordinance about not expanding or contracting wetlands, and you need to understand those, but that's not something that we flagged. So heads up, folks, on this permitting thing, we are creating a California specific Beaver Corps training on permitting. And we were looking for case studies so that we would be well informed with this training. And we had to actually develop, that's what we're using the Stonebriar project for as a case study, because we didn't have case studies. And we thought it was essential to have a well-documented case study as part of that curriculum. So we hope to release that California specific thing this fall with Aaron's help. So heads up, and thanks, Nikki, for making us aware that this may be an issue in the Tahoe Basin, and may have other small, like the Coastal Commission has its own interesting rules in the coastal zone too. And so we'll need to cover those for this piece of the California certification program. Andrew?
Yeah, I just wanted to continue commenting on the permitting, and just the biggest thing is creating a relationship with your permitting people, so that way to talk to you directly. You don't have to send the general emails. But another thing is that, yeah, as this continues on, obviously we're going to run into more and more requirements, because it seems like everyone's different. Depends on who you have. That kind of interprets what the requirements are per the law, and then kind of looks at your project and sees what it is. And so with that being said, I'm hoping that a lot of these mitigations kind of evolve to be a lot more California friendly, because obviously lifting up the pipes and stuff, the sediment's going to build behind the beaver dam anyways. But I think having research and case studies that kind of prove the point that these kind of sit in like kind of a gray area, of the requirements of the law, so that we can get around permitting. And then another thought is to try and piggyback these mitigation projects on, planned or already occurring infrastructure projects. So, Caltrans is putting in a new culvert system. Well, you just piggyback on beaver mitigation onto the project. So that way, you're having to bypass permitting the mitigation by itself. And so that's almost like a consultant kind of situation. But I think that's one way to continue promoting the coexistence and getting the devices installed and doing cost savings overall.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And so we have to move on with the program. I'm sure there's other questions. I want to encourage, like Kathy, you're opting in unless you tell me you want to opt out to this Google group where we can exchange experiences, guidance, etc. on permitting. So thank you, Kathy, for organizing that. It's a real stepping up with leadership. Let me know if you don't want to get, so if you know about Google groups, you put something in, it emails the whole group that there's a comment, and then you can go in and respond or add, right? So yeah, so you'll be getting more emails. Kathy?
And I would just mention that you can set up the settings so that it just sends you a daily digest
There
if
you
you
go.
don't want a bunch of emails.
Right. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, we've come to the point where we get to hear from Valerie on the CDFW's Beaver Restoration Program and maybe some other stuff. Valerie, you're up.
Okay, give me a second to shuffle screens here, and we all got lucky because they just ran a wood chipper right outside my window for about the last 20 minutes. So fingers crossed they don't fire up again.
Yeah, we hope so.
All right, let's see here.
And Kate and Nikki, your hands are virtually still up. I don't know if you want them to be, but that might confuse us in the future.
All right.
There we
You
go.
guys have my screen coming through okay?
We do. There's an odd gray box that's slowly disappearing at the top of it, but yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that goes away soon. That's my control there. Did that help?
Well, it's still there, but it's not. Oh, it disappeared just now. Yes. Okay.
There we go. All right. So I think maybe a couple of folks joined after I introduced myself earlier. So I'll just mention again, my name is Valerie Cook. I am CDFW's Beaver Restoration Program Manager. So I just want to thank the Occidental team for the opportunity to connect with the trainees in this network of folks here. My goal here today is to highlight the people and processes within CDFW that have a nexus to managing human-beaver conflict and coexistence efforts, so that you are all aware of the roles we each play and we can start to get familiar with the various opportunities for coordination. So before I dive in, I always like to kind of set the stage of what I'll be covering, especially since there's really a broad range of information that I'll be covering today. So just quickly, I'm going to go through just a quick introduction to CDFW's Beaver Restoration Program, cover some of the laws and regulations that are pertinent in these conversations, also speak about the policy, our internal processes, and opportunities for coordination, as well as some details that I'd like to share about permitting, and then we can dive into a Q&A session. Okay, so starting with just a brief introduction to the Beaver Restoration Program and some information about what we do and also what we don't do, so that you know where some other key players come into the picture. The Beaver Restoration Program was established in early 2023, and two of our primary directives are supporting human-beaver coexistence and conducting beaver translocations for implementation of ecosystem restoration. So our coexistence tasks include, among other things, developing a coexistence toolkit that provides education and outreach, covering why coexistence is beneficial, but also helps landowners understand the deterrents that can be used to resolve various types of conflict. Includes build sheets, that we call them build sheets, that are instructions for self-installation and provide details about costs, maintenance, and minimum standard sizes for fencing installed in channel. That's important for our fish passage conversation. So the intention there is minimizing the potential for fish impingement in high flows and preventing impediment or perceived impediment to fish passage. In terms of our translocations, it's important to note that the department's directive and our efforts come from the angle of pursuing ecosystem restoration facilitated by beaver relocation. Facilitated by beavers, as opposed to the primary goal of beaver relocation for conflict management, which is why we're all here today working to further coexistence strategies as a solution for managing human-beaver conflict. Sorry, tongue-tied today. So the department, we will never have anywhere near the capacity required to offer relocation as a standard strategy for alleviating conflicts. However, when we do have approved restoration sites ready to go, it is our goal to utilize active conflict beavers when and where feasible. So it's important that we keep our finger on the pulse of when and where conflicts are happening, particularly those that can't feasibly resolve with non-lethal methods. One other important thing to note is that the Beaver Restoration Program is not the unit in CDFW that responds to human-wildlife conflicts. So while we do have this role in supporting and promoting human-beaver coexistence, it's actually our regional staff that are typically assigned out to specific counties that function as what we call conflict responders. So that's important to know because that is a statewide network of staff that are interfacing with all the landowners that are experiencing beaver conflict. So they need to know about you, what services you're offering, and what areas you work in. So it's also really important here that I explain the laws, regulations, and later the policies that will shape how and when CDFW staff may need to refer landowners out for your assistance. Fish and Game Code Section 4181 states that CDFW shall issue depredation permits. Permit issuance, well, I'll just read this here. We shall issue depredation permits to owners or tenants for animals damaging or destroying property or threatening to. Permit issuance requires satisfactory evidence of damage or the threat of damage. So in some cases where that satisfactory evidence doesn't exist, we can't issue those requested permits and can only provide recommendations for non-lethal deterrence. Alternatively, where those requirements are satisfied, we shall issue the permit if the landowner requests it. However, we do have the ability to condition those permits with requirements for implementation of deterrence to prevent future damages. Otherwise, they may not be eligible in the future for additional permits for lethal take of those conflict animals. So we're really starting to see those two scenarios occur more and more frequently due to CDFW's updated policy guidance on beaver depredation, which I'm going to touch on next. So concurrent with the creation of the Beaver Restoration Program, CDFW updated its policy or guidance for managing beaver depredation, and effectively that policy update ensures that our staff are doing their due diligence in investigating beaver depredation reports before issuing lethal permits, considering the impacts of removing those beavers, and also, this is a key one, identifying and recommending feasible non-lethal coexistence strategies, and also ensuring compliance with past permit conditions that required implementation of deterrence. So note that I said recommending feasible coexistence strategy. So if you recall the law that I mentioned previously, that requires us to issue depredation permits where the requirements are met. So landowners opting to pursue installation of non-lethal deterrence instead really is entirely voluntary. And it comes with a whole new burden that previously just was not a topic. We also recognize there's not only the financial burden that people are voluntarily taking on to go the non-lethal route, but we also recognized there was really an entire lack of technical assistance being available to people who can't or don't want to or don't know how to do these installations themselves. So, we found ourselves in a situation of we can't expect people to make this voluntary shift towards non-lethal management without any kind of resources to help support them. So that's where this grant opportunity came to fruition. And where we're hoping that this coexistence program and this network of trained technicians can really help fill that gap. So how do we make these connections? How do we at CDFW identify those needs and help make the connections to those that can offer the technical assistance or the financial assistance where it's needed or it's desired? So I want to speak about our internal process. CDFW relies on what we call the Wildlife Incident Reporting System, or you're going to hear me say WIR. For landowners to be able to submit human-wildlife conflict incidents to CDFW. So that is the sole mechanism for triggering engagement with CDFW on these conflicts. And it's used by landowners seeking assistance or guidance. It's used by those seeking depredation permits. And it's also the mechanism for landowners that are hoping for their conflict beavers to be relocated. So to be clear, relocation is not a menu option that people can just request and expect that it's going to happen, but it is how to get a conflict scenario in front of the beaver restoration program for consideration. So process-wise, once a conflict is reported in this wildlife incident reporting system, the local conflict responder investigates and engages with that landowner, and based on the information that they gather, a few different things can happen. They can offer their recommendations for any non-lethal deterrents that may help resolve the issue. They can refer them to the Beaver Restoration Program for consultation, or moving forward, we're hoping that either they or we can help connect them with the Coexistence Program or a local coexistence technician that can help with implementation of those non-lethal deterrents. Or they may be denied a requested permit and offered instead recommendations for coexistence, or they may be issued a permit which may include conditions for future implementation of deterrence. So I would like to make very clear that landowners do not need to come to CDFW or go through us to connect with you. We really only have to be involved if depredation permits are being requested or if they are hoping for relocation. However, I would like us all to consider that this wildlife incident reporting system is a clearinghouse for all conflict data. And those metrics are really important both to CDFW and also to folks like OAEC that may be interested in analyzing that data. I would like to stress that that's also what the Beaver Restoration Program reviews. We review those conflicts and the information gathered about them when seeking translocation candidates for restoration projects. But this clearinghouse really is what we use to track the distribution and the prevalence of conflicts to help us identify potential source populations. And, as we're all talking about seeking resources that can help support this program into the future, I think it's important to acknowledge that data also helps demonstrate the scale of the need for managing human-wildlife conflict and helps to support asks for resources, the resources needed for helping to support coexistence. So for that reason, even though landowners don't need to go through CDFW to reach you, I would still encourage all of us to consider steering people to the wildlife incident reporting system for documentation purposes. You can very clearly in the system indicate whether or not you're claiming depredation or requesting a permit, or if you're just reporting. So I think that's an important factor that we can all consider, whether or not, if folks go directly to you, whether or not we still coordinate to make sure that all that data is compiled. So just to kind of take this full circle, what does this look like in terms of coordination between your network and the coexistence program and CDFW? So again, CDFW staff can refer landowners to you for any of the scenarios that I previously covered. Landowners can go to you directly without CDFW involvement of any kind. Coexistence technicians can, in some cases, I would say should refer landowners to report incidents in the WEIR if after due process you've determined non-lethal deterrents are ultimately ineffective in that scenario, or if they desire to be considered for relocation, or if ultimately that landowner desires a depredation permit. And then I'm going to finish this off with a few notes about permitting requirements from CDFW. The primary code section that we're talking about here, Fish and Game Code Section 1602 on lake and streambed alteration agreements. This code requires entities to notify CDFW prior to commencing activity that may substantially alter a river, lake, or stream. So we can confidently say that projects using heavy equipment, particularly in the channel, or that may substantially change bed, bank, or channel will likely require an LSA agreement. And in that case, you've got to work the channels. I do want to note that in that scenario, LSA agreements for this type of work can consider going through the Cutting the Green Tape program or the HREA program. But as some of you previously mentioned, if you're working with municipalities or other entities that might already have routine maintenance agreements, a lot of this work can fall under those existing routine maintenance agreements that they have per LSA. So that's something to be aware of. However, I'll say that other aquatic installation projects that only involve hand tools, typically, if following the build sheets that we're about to release, those typically won't require an LSA agreement. However, and this is important language to follow, the notification requirement must still be met. So the department has to have an opportunity to review what the work that's being proposed so that we can say we've determined no agreement is required. However, notification also requires a fee. And then you've got to sit and wait for the department to decide that you don't need an agreement and to refund the money. And that's a big circular burden that we are trying to avoid moving forward. So for that reason, within the department, we are working with our lake and streambed alteration program, our Cutting the Green Tape program, to create a self-certification process that allows my program to gather information similar to what must be submitted in a formal LSA notification, to gather information about where the work is being performed, what's being performed, what's the period of work, the work window, gathering all of that information and determining whether or not you are following, for example, the minimum standard requirements for fencing panels that are being installed in channel, so that we can come back and say the notification requirements have been met and we've determined no LSA, this doesn't require further notification for LSA, so that we can kind of try to streamline things that way. That also opens the door for if we do see red flags or activities that we cannot confidently say will not have a significant impact, then we refer to the LSA program. Now, I will also note, we're continuing these internal conversations with our permitting folks to try to figure out how best to streamline. Those folks are very closely connected with the state water boards and Army Corps permitting folks. They have a lot of coordination and regular meetings. So our intention is to work through those folks to start hopefully expanding our reach in terms of coordination on permitting requirements and trying to make sure that we're trying as best we can to get everybody on the same page for consistency and try to streamline as best we can. So at this point, we're working within CDFW to streamline, and then we'll be moving forward with also working with the water boards and other entities to try to help streamline these processes moving forward. So on that note, we'll open it up for questions. On this slide is our program's email address and web page, and I want to open it up for questions, but I also want to end this on, I would like to request and encourage that this group maintain a dialogue with us to help us understand how we can best continue supporting these efforts, particularly when it comes to topics of outreach in the community and permitting challenges and needs. So we're here to support as best we can within the capacity that we have in this program, but hoping to continue learning about how things are going and what the needs are so that we can try to help be the best facilitator that we can.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Like to hear all the information. I've heard some of it from you before. It just keeps getting better, more comprehensive. It's nice to hear the work you're doing and moving this forward. Thanks for all the support.
Mm-hmm.
I see Jordan or Geneva's hand. Yes, Geneva.
Hi, sorry, that's probably confusing with both being on the same
That's all right. I can keep doing
it. Just mostly a clarifying question. Just to go back about whether if someone were to contact us directly, do you only want us to put it into the WER if they're seeking a depredation permit, or it seems like it could be beneficial to just have them fill out a questions or assistance just to like log that data? Or I'm just curious what your hopes are for us from that.
I think if you or the landowner are willing, I would encourage us to collect that data, even if they're not seeking a depredation permit, just logging the incident so that, I mean, in this grant opportunity, we were able to highlight our highest density for conflict and say, these are the priority areas. But if you guys are doing such a great job that we're not getting the data anymore, then it looks like there's no more problems. Or there's fewer problems, maybe less resources are needed because these aren't. So I'm hoping to prevent skewing the data because we're starting to get solutions in place. So I would encourage reporting, just not, you don't have to go the step of requesting a permit. You can log it just as an incident or a complaint.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks for all your work coordinating on the back end.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Silas, you had your hand up next, and then Kate.
Got to remember what I was going to say. Oh, it was something around permitting. I got it. So when I first contacted my local water resource control board, the person I was talking to, I started, talking to them. It's like normally, like when you contact a permit office, you're trying to receive a permit, right? And in this particular case, I'm like trying to answer a question for a test on, the Beaver Restoration Program's website, right? So it wasn't like, hey, like, I have this particular project site and I need to do these things and what are the permitting requirements? It was more along the lines of this conversation of, so I don't know if you've heard, but like, the state of California has recently started this beaver restoration program. And so now like, there's this, concerted effort within the state to, do these particular things. And so the, low-tech process-based restoration being, a key part of that. And then also the being able to do the coexistence management of the beavers being the other side of it. And when I approached it in that way, she became extremely helpful. I wasn't like, she was, just trying to, get me the information and move on with her day. It's like, oh, she understood that this is, something that's important and that has, these, far-reaching consequences. And, she was, looking and searching for any way that this could be, basically streamlined and minimized. So, Valerie, you had said, or asked how you could support us going forward. And one thing that I would say would be, outreach to, these, regulators, and, especially if it's coming from you, who has this position within CDFW, and you're able to come in with this authority and you're saying, hey, these are the priorities in the state right now. We want to, increase our water storage capacity. We want to reduce our wildfires. We want to increase our biodiversity. And this is how we do that. And we need to get rid of these permitting requirements entirely, right? Or at least minimize them, to the best of our ability. We of course, there still needs to be accountability, like you're saying with the self-certification, right? But if there's a problem and, someone's house is going to get flooded, right? You don't have a week to wait around for, helping this person out, right? And it would be, extremely beneficial across the board, just to make this as streamlined as possible. And I think, a lot of people have been saying that. But it's all kind of, matter of perspective of the individual people that are, in that position of authority to do the rubber stamp or not, right? So this is where, that outreach and education, I think, is pretty critical, and establishing those relationships with the regulators.
Hey, thank you for that feedback, Silas. I appreciate that. Yeah, we have a big job ahead of us in terms of how many people to coordinate with, but we're hoping to move through, internally and then agency by agency to streamline as much as the laws and regulations allow.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I understand, Valerie, in part with your work with the state water board, that that they have had their regular monthly meeting with all the regional water boards and have been starting to talk about, pushing out this information to the regions from the state board, which understands some of the complexities and benefits of beaver coexistence. Let's see, Kate, you had your hand up, and then Jordan. You're on mute. Sorry, Kate. Yep, there you are.
Yeah, I managed to get my hand down, but not my mute off. Thanks, Valerie. And super important reminder just about the WEIR and tracking those data. So thank you for reiterating that. And I think that's really good for all of us to be thinking about. And regarding the build sheets, I know they're coming out. Hopefully you can give us a sense of timeline. I know that's hard to look into your crystal ball there. I'm curious about if you're anticipating they're going to be significantly different than what's already being included in Beaver Core training, for example. And if so, what are those differences you anticipate? And what bearing those build sheets will play on just the profession? Is this a regulatory thing? Is it recommendations? What are you hoping to achieve with the build sheets, just so that we can keep that in mind and anticipate that?
I think that these are going to be fairly consistent with anything else that's out there through the Beaver Institute or Beavers Northwest. We've done some outreach to have, several different groups of folks reviewing these. Really, this is just us, creating a comprehensive set of resources that we can put out there in this toolkit, and we can funnel to all of our conflict responders that are making the recommendations. I think the primary differences, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel by any means. We're trying to be consistent with what other folks are recommending. The primary things that may be differences, may not be differences, are surrounding some of the internally expressed I'll say concerns or considerations about fish passage and fish impingement. So specifically where installation involves cattle panels, weld wire panels, turning those so the orientation is the height is the taller dimension, and setting minimum standard sizes, minimum standards, standard minimums, so that we are, using sizes that are small enough to prevent entry and access by small beavers, but are as big as we can reasonably make them to try to prevent impingement or passage issues. And, I don't inherently believe that these devices are going to be impediments to fish passage, but there's a perception component to this as well. There are people who will believe that they do. So it's, I think in our best interest to maximize the likelihood that we're keeping out the smallest beavers and minimizing the likelihood that we're causing issues with fish, and also incumbent upon us to follow up with some case studies. I think that's another conversation we should continue in this group, is case studies documenting efficacy and helping us understand whether or not we do in some scenarios encounter issues moving forward so that we can adjust from there. Because the last thing any of us want to do is install these with all of the best intentions and find that we have something is not working. And then we've got this perception out there and it's word of mouth and none of this works. It's all bad, So I think we've got to maintain this open dialogue. But in terms of regulatory versus recommendations, we do not have regulatory authority to place these as requirements. This is strictly recommendation and voluntary. The only quote unquote authority that we have in this is if we condition some permits with, you need to install device X, Y, or Z to alleviate this issue and prevent depredation, prevent these issues in the future, because nobody wants to continue this cycle of like, kill them, more come back, kill them, more come back, kill them, more come back. We're trying to avoid that, but that's our only sort of regulatory or authoritative hook, is if that's a condition within a permit. Otherwise, these are recommendations for best practices.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks, Kate, for the question. Did you get all your questions answered there, Kate? Okay, great. Jordan, I see you. Forward.
Yeah. Woohoo. It's me. Yeah, this is just kind of an overall question, certainly around also species protection in this way, and also just permitting. With PBR implementation builds, oftentimes there are certain time periods where it's more better to be in the creek than other times, depending on nesting bird season or some audit habitat. And I'm just curious with implementing the flow devices, and if we foresee there being snags with timing of putting these devices in at certain times of the year, if there is some form of, because part of it is like emergency response and getting in soon, but it could be in a time period during a season that might raise red flags for certain agencies or regulatory agencies. I'm just curious of some folks' thoughts on that.
So I'll say that and permitting is not my wheelhouse, so I'm doing my best here. Part of the LSA folks' evaluation includes what are there potential impacts or potentials to significantly impact local listed species or sensitive resources. And so, part of that self-certification process that we're creating is asking about what is the window, what is the work period that's being proposed, because ultimately when that certification is turned around, that's part of the evaluation is this likely to substantially alter bed bank or channel, / is this likely or has a very real potential to significantly affect fish and wildlife resources. And so that's part of the puzzle that we have to evaluate. But I think it's a very good question that you ask. And I think, I'll note here that maybe in in the toolkit, we should be acknowledging sensitive windows of time for nesting birds and salmonid movement. Don't want to complicate the window, but we do want to provide the best guidance that we can. So thank you for that note.
Thanks. And Kathy, I'll put you on the spot also for your experience with the department and talking about timing or other wildlife concerns in your area. Did you have a conversation with a wildlife biologist at Stonebriar, or any guidance there on any concerns they might have had?
There were no concerns at Stonebriar. Because of our email to proceed, I did check in with permitting folks at CDFW and was told I didn't need to do any more and we were good to go.
Right.
I mean, as Jordan mentioned, on restoration projects, there's definitely timing concerns when you have owls and tadpoles and all these things going on. But at this site, we didn't have those concerns.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe just another plug that each region has wildlife biologists, right, that you can maybe ought to talk to early about these kinds of things to see if they have local knowledge about timing and species and those kinds of things.
Well, on that note, I will say that the conflict responders that I'm talking about typically, in most cases, is the local unit biologist that's assigned to that county or that, series of counties. So definitely relationships that are worth building.
Not seeing anybody else's hands, and it's time to wind down anyway, so I'm glad to get the immediate questions answered. We've got 3 more minutes in this. I want to just say, well, we're looking forward to seeing you on the morning of the 30th at 8 a.m. at the Cosumnes River parking lot, the preserve parking lot. Please really take a look at that, this supplies, equipment that you ought to come with. We hope you bring what you need. And we're looking forward to time in the field to talk about these projects a lot more in detail, and also with the local site managers. We have recorded this today, so if you want to recap, I will share the recording with you. It'll go up on YouTube, I think, later today or tomorrow. We are missing a couple of the people who will be with us in the field. So I'm sorry to miss them. They're going to watch this thing and be prepared likewise. Any last pressing questions with, where we're meeting or what we're doing, or you're all prepared to be there? All right. Very good. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thanks, Kathy and Valerie, for coming in and helping with the program today. Kate and Brock, thanks for your presentation on getting us grounded with what beavers are all about here in California. Thanks again for all of you Beaver Corps folks who are taking time out from your lives to push forward beaver coexistence in California. It is such a pleasure to get to know you all. Really enjoyed getting to know you and seeing your learning trajectories, and look forward to cooperating, collaborating, making sure all of you get the work you need, because we know the work needs getting done. And so looking forward to helping you on your journey, and likewise looking forward to hearing from some of you about your networks and where we can get this work done on the ground. Folks, we have $800,000 that we need to get into supplies and consulting, and this all needs to get spent in like a little over a year. So pedal to the metal. Now that you've finished part 1, let's get going with projects, because we've got the resources behind you to make this stuff happen. You see, Valerie's team has such expertise and momentum to add to it, and the Beaver Institute people are standing behind you to mentor through this. Everything is going our way. Let's see if we can get this work on the ground. Looking forward to seeing you soon in the field. Email me or questions or comments along the way. We'll be in touch. Thanks so much. Great program today. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thanks all.
Bye,
Look forward to working
everyone.
with you.
Whoop, whoop.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.